remember just this feeling like I had jumped into the deep end of a pool, and that's what I was like under the water during each contraction, and I would like swim to the surface and take a breath in between contractions, and then I would be like back down in the water.
Welcome to the Happy Homebirth podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things homebirth and motherhood. We love talking about homebirth here, right? I mean, it's kind of our thing. But what about the other end of the life spectrum? What about death? Hey there, happy homebirthers, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Homebirth podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today we're speaking with Mariah Lassiter, a hospice registered nurse who had her first baby at home. As she has supported patients in her career, Mariah has begun to recognize how many similarities there are in the birthing and dying processes, and how both do not have to be viewed as scary, and in fact can be beautiful. We will hear her incredible birth story with her first child, and then dive into what she's learned in her time as a hospice nurse. Okay, let's get into it. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this podcast is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Mariah, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Homebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me be here. I really enjoyed listening to all of your videos while I was pregnant, so I'm happy to be able to share my story.
Oh, I am thrilled to have you. And as we will kind of unfurl throughout this conversation, it'll become more clear why this is such a cool conversation and such an amazing way to start back the Happy Homebirth podcast. So I am just so excited for all of the information that you're going to be sharing. Before we get to that, would you take just a few moments to introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Mariah. I am from North Carolina, but I'm now here in Virginia. So, I have one son, my first son. He was born at home. Um, I ended up having a precipitous labor at home with my first son. And I'm married. I am married to my husband, Justin, and we live on a small farm and just kind of enjoy the homestead life. And in addition to all that, I'm also a hospice nurse.
Wow, so you have a lot of things going right now.
Yep, lots going on, definitely very busy. So we're having fun with all the chaos and whatnot.
I love it. That's amazing. Okay, so you just mentioned that you had your first baby at home. A lot of times, as you know, moms will have a birthing experience in the hospital that doesn't go the way that they had hoped, and then they turn to home birth. But you started out your journey here. How did you come to the decision to give birth at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely wanted to skip over the traumatic hospital birth experience and just go ahead and do it at home. But really, how I got to home birth is my whole life that I can remember, I've always envisioned myself giving birth at home. I've always kind of been like a birth nerd. Even when I was a teenager, I loved to watch like birthing videos and listening to like home births and watching them on YouTube. I would watch them all the time and I was just enthralled by them. I loved it so much. I thought it was such an empowering experience. And I've also been very naturally minded, for a long time. And just being at home is where I've always felt most comfortable. So, uh, I just I couldn't have envisioned any other scenario for myself, really.
Yeah, that is amazing. Now, what about your husband? I know a lot of times in these conversations, husbands and wives can be on very different pages. So, what did he think about this whole concept of giving birth at home?
Oh my gosh. Well, I got pregnant a little unexpectedly. I had an IUD when I got pregnant. And, even when my husband and I were dating, I had always mentioned, if we go to have a baby, I'm going to have the baby at home. Like, this is my plan. This is my vision. This is what we're going to do. And before I was pregnant, he would say, yeah, okay, all right, Mariah, that sounds good. Whatever. We never really talked too much about it, but he did know it was on my mind. And then once I got pregnant and actually started looking into having a home birth, he thought, wait, hold on. What are we doing here? Pump the brakes. What do you mean you're getting a midwife? Who is going to be coming into our house? Why aren't we going to the hospital? So he didn't really have any other experience with home birth. I don't even think he had ever watched any sort of birth video. Like he was just really, disconnected from that sort of world. But luckily, my neighbor had her son at home, and we lived in this house during that time. So he did have a little bit of like somebody to relate it to. So I think that that helped make him a lot more confident. And then once I did actually find a midwife, we ended up going with a certified nurse midwife, mostly to appease my husband, with just her having like she had like 20 years of experience, and that just made him feel a lot more confident because we do live about 30 minutes from the nearest hospital. So that just kind of helped put him at ease. And then once we got further along in my pregnancy, he started to get more and more on board with the whole home birth. And after we did end up having the baby at home, he kind of said, okay, wow, I can't imagine having to have gone to the hospital and having to stay overnight there. Like, this was so nice just being able to stay in the comfort of our home right after having the baby. So we came full circle in the end.
Yes, that's amazing. And I feel like it happens that way quite a bit.
Hmm.
But when we get into your story, we'll kind of see this more. But I'm honestly, I can't imagine that you would have made it to the hospital if you had chosen a hospital birth. So it was great.
Yeah, and that's why throughout my pregnancy, people would kind of give me a little bit of a hard time. Like, why are you going to be having a home birth? Why don't you just go to the hospital and have an unmedicated birth in the hospital? And I would just say over and over again, this is really just what feels right for me. I just couldn't explain it, but I just felt so aligned with having a home birth, and it's all I could. The thought of having the baby in the hospital to me was it just didn't align with me at all, so I couldn't have even pictured myself doing it. And I think it was just like, in hindsight, looking back, I, on a deeper level, knew that I wouldn't have been able to make it to the hospital, and so that's kind of how it all ended up working out.
Yep, absolutely. That deep intuition, that just knowing of this is the
Yes.
right choice for me. And somebody on the
Mhm.
other end of the spectrum may know they need to go to the hospital. It works both ways with that
Definitely.
intuition. But that is so beautiful that that was
Yes.
your experience and you knew it so long throughout the pregnancy. And I'm curious to hear more
Mhm.
about your pregnancy. Were you working as a nurse at that time?
No, when I was pregnant, I was in the middle of nursing school, which is, I wasn't planning on getting pregnant, but once I did get pregnant, we were like very excited and all that sort of stuff. So I kept going to nursing school. I was working as a yoga instructor, and I worked as a yoga instructor and went to nursing school up until I was about 38 or 39 weeks pregnant. And then I took a break from that kind of later on in my pregnancy, but took a break from both of those things. And yeah, I did end up having a really easy pregnancy, I would say. I tried to stay really active throughout it, tried to do lots of walking, lots of stretching, eating healthy. And I think that that made it a lot easier on my body. And yeah, so I wasn't working as a nurse. I took some time off. And then after I had the baby, a couple months later, I finished nursing school. I only had, I think, 2 or 3 months left. So I was kind of on the tail end already. So yeah.
Wow. And was that, I mean, obviously you already mentioned that there were people around you who were asking, well, why are you not going to the hospital? I would imagine that in that type of scenario, it could have been even more so than just any other person walking around. You are in this
Oh,
medical
definitely.
arena.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's actually funny that you mentioned that because when I was maybe 7 months pregnant, I was doing a clinical rotation on a labor and delivery unit. So I was obviously looking very pregnant at the time and around all of these other labor and delivery nurses, like kind of shadowing them and working alongside with them. And I remember I was trying to keep my mouth shut about having a home birth because I did not want to tell those ladies there that I was having one. And one of my friends in nursing school mentioned it to the nurses there, of course, that I was planning this home birth and all this sort of stuff. And they looked at me like I was a lunatic. They were like, "What are you thinking? You're going to school right now to be a nurse. How could you think about having a home birth?" And that's because they're just in that system of intervention, intervention, intervention. And even there on that floor, it was rare to see a woman have an unmedicated birth. I remember in like the weeks I was on that unit, we would have like one woman here and there, but otherwise it was these people just being intervened with over and over and over again. It was like the cycle started. They started their contractions slow down. They start Pitocin. They do the Pitocin. The Pitocin gets to be too intense. Then they get the epidural. The epidural slows down their labor. Now they're talking about doing a C-section or talking about doing a vacuum assist or an episiotomy. All of these different interventions that could they have been avoided if we stopped with no interventions? Possibly, but it was just all these people were going down these same set of interventions time and time again. And I, looking back, I'd been listening to your podcast, I'd been watching all these home births where people are doing no intervention. And it was just interesting to see all of the differences in the mindset between the medical staff and, the people that are working outside of the system and like being in midwifery care during that time and seeing all of the differences between how my midwife operated versus, these OBGYNs in the hospital.
Wow. Yes, I imagine that was just such a stark contrast and
Definitely.
just thinking about seeing that and seeing all of these well-meaning nurses who are,
Hmm.
supporting mothers but supporting them in, ways that are so different from what you're experiencing. I kind of imagine it would have
Hmm.
really driven the point home of like, wow, this can be so different. Like it could be so different.
Yes, it definitely did. It definitely did. And yeah, it definitely solidified my decision to be having the baby at home. Just time and time again, each time I stepped onto that floor, I would just have to, I'm just a nursing student. I have no say here. I can do the best I can to, emotionally support these people and giving them words of encouragement. But outside of that, I have no pull. There's not much else I can do. Um, Unfortunately, but it
Yeah.
was difficult to watch.
Yeah. And knowing that those people have the right to give birth however they want. I think the most unfortunate part is,
Definitely.
yeah, the most unfortunate part is when we think, okay, if they had had the education, they might not have chosen this. But yeah, absolutely. Like if that's the way you want to give birth, then hey, go for it. But
Hmm.
oh, if you knew of the other options, it could be different. And speaking of the
Yeah.
other options, I'd love to hear what was your experience like with your midwife as a certified nurse midwife. So she's got the same nursing training that you have. I'm sure that that was pretty cool
Mhm.
to be able to bond over that. But what was your experience like with her?
Yeah, I loved my midwife. Even though she was more of a medical midwife,
Ah,
I did still enjoy being under her care. I felt like she gave a lot of informed consent, where before anything that we would do, she would go over the pros and the cons, even whenever, even for like just the GBS swab for Group B strep. She explained, okay, well, we can do this swab. If we do this swab and we find out that you have, this Group B strep, are you going to want to treat it? Is it even worth, doing this test? Are you going to do the antibiotics? Do you want to just like preemptively, like taking things like garlic? So she was still very naturally minded in that way and very hands off. So from the get go, I expressed that I wanted to deliver my baby and her
yeah.
be there for an emergency. If things are really going south and you feel like I absolutely need your help, then I would like for you to step in. But outside of that, I don't want you to touch me. I want to do this myself.
Mhm.
And she was very respectful of that. And I felt very confident under her care, some people really exude this authority where you can tell they know what they're talking about and that they believe you and that they trust you. So I felt that like mutual respect between the both of us, and I really, really liked that. Anything I brought to her, she was very understanding of. And even though, she was a medical midwife, I felt like she gave me the option to be hands off.
That's amazing. I think it's so interesting. A lot of times we do believe, like, okay, if they're a nurse midwife, then they are just automatically more medically minded. And in my
Hmm.
experience, that has not always been the case. My midwife is a nurse midwife, and she is so attuned to what each mother is looking for. So, just like you were
Hmm.
saying, so willing to just be completely hands off. The authority you mentioned, it's like she has this internal knowing that she trusts herself and she trusts this
Yes.
mother and she trusts this baby and she
Hmm.
trusts this process, and she's there to watch and observe, and if something goes south, she knows that she can take care of it. But for the
Absolutely.
most part, she knows it's not going to go south. She knows there's not going to be
Hmm.
complications if she just does just stay back and watch. So I love hearing that you had the same type of experience with a nurse midwife. And it's just a great point to kind of drive home of, hey, a lot of times we think like if someone is, quote, just a certified professional midwife or just a licensed midwife and
Hmm.
not a certified nurse midwife, that you're going to receive a different type of care. And sometimes maybe, but that is so much more care provider dependent than anything else.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely have, future babies with her. I really, really enjoyed being under her care and her care team. And she had some student nurse midwives that were working alongside her too. So it was interesting to be able to talk to them because they were going from being RNs, like registered nurses, and starting to make that transition into certified nurse midwives. So it's just kind of interesting to hear their background with like labor and delivery, how that differed from these home births. And it was just all really cool, especially since I was on a lot of these labor and delivery units at the same time. Just watching these parallels kind of unfolding was super neat.
Mm, that is amazing. Okay, so as we start getting closer to your guest date giving birth, is there anything else you'd like to share about that process? And if not, whenever you're ready, I'd love for you to share about your birth experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was due on December 25th, so Christmas Day. Um, so we called my son our miracle baby because I got pregnant with the IUD, and then our due date was on Christmas. So we just thought that that was really neat. So Christmas came around. I had my big old belly, and no contractions. So Christmas came and went. We spent time with our family. Everyone was asking me, "Do you feel like you're going into labor? Any sort of signs? What's going on?" I was having no symptoms. I'm like, "Life is good. I'll probably carry this baby to 42 weeks, and who knows? We'll see when he comes." So on the 27th, that's the day my son was born, December 27th, I had my 40-week midwife appointment, and that was at 2 in the afternoon. So my husband and I woke up that morning. He asked me, "Do you think you're gonna have the baby today? Like, should I go to work? Should I stay home? What do you think I should do?" I said, "Go to work. I'm not gonna have this baby today. I'm totally fine. If I feel like I'm gonna have him, I'll have you come back home." So he goes to work. Around 2 o'clock, I go to my midwife appointment. I remember on the way there, I had, some back pain throughout like the end of my pregnancy. And I would just do like some stretches and stuff to help relieve it. And I was having that, same back pain that day. So I was kind of like massaging my back, a little bit of a backache. Go to my appointment. I'm telling them, I'm having like, some back pain, been having this throughout my pregnancy. They say, "Okay, don't worry about this back pain. Just do your stretches." I also had one of those acupressure mats that helped me so much throughout my pregnancy. I would lay on that. So we go through the appointment. They asked me if I wanted to do a cervical exam. I'd never had a cervical exam before, and I wasn't sure if it was something that I wanted to do when I was actually in labor. So I thought, you know what, I'll try this. we'll see how it goes, and see if that's something that's going to be helpful to me when I'm actually in labor. So we do the cervical exam. They tell me that I am a whopping 1.5 centimeters dilated. And that basically the labor's probably not going to be today, but keep doing what you're doing, keep doing your stretches, drinking water, staying healthy. So I leave the midwife appointment. I head to the grocery store. I get to the grocery store like 3:30. I'm walking around the grocery store. And while I was there, I started to feel what I thought were contractions. So I'm thinking, amazing. I'm probably going into labor. How awesome. And as I was going through the grocery store, these contractions really started to pick up. So I went to the bathroom. When I was in the bathroom, I noticed that I was losing my mucus plug. So I'm thinking, great, labor is here. Now, from when I go to the bathroom to when I get to the cash register, I was having the most intense contractions. I was having to hold on to where the card reader is and all but moan to get through these contractions. They were just wildly intense out of nowhere. And I am alone 30 minutes away from my house in full on labor at the grocery store. I throw my groceries in my car. I don't even remember the drive home, but I got home, threw my groceries inside, and I remember texting my husband because he used to go to the gym after he would go to work. And I messaged him. I said, hey, I don't think you should go to the gym tonight. Once you are done with work, maybe just head straight home. Because at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I've been in labor for a whopping 30 minutes. Like, we probably have a long road ahead of us. No need to like ring the bells right now. But boy, was I wrong. So I, continue to labor. I messaged my midwife, and I had just seen my midwife. So this was probably like 4:45, 5 o'clock. I'm messaging her like, hey, I think I'm in labor. I'm not really sure. I don't know why I was telling her I think I'm in labor. I was obviously looking back in labor, but I was so scared that I was going to be like having all these people come to my house too soon because I had just started labor. So in my mind, I just couldn't believe how quickly things were progressing, how I could be having these super intense contractions out of nowhere. Because I'd always heard, first time moms, you could be in labor for 24 plus hours. And here I am 1 hour in thinking that I need to call my midwife to come deliver the baby. So, anyways, she told me, try to lay down, drink some water, just try your best to relax and maybe time a couple contractions and then call me back. So, I timed a few contractions and they were a minute long and they were 15 seconds apart.
Oh,
So, I was
my
deep
word.
in labor.
Gosh.
Yes, in wildly intense.
Oh, that's no
And
break.
no break. I remember just this feeling like I had jumped into the deep end of a pool, and that's what I was like under the water during each contraction. And I would like swim to the surface and take a breath in between contractions, and then I would be like back down in the water. That's just like what it felt like. It felt like there was just no break. My body was just ready to have the baby. So I had a doula at the time. My midwife did really encourage all first-time moms to have a doula if, you were planning to have a home birth. So I called my doula and I, explained to her at this point I'm sweating, I'm nauseous. I like it's December, I'm opening up the windows in the house. I'm like taking my clothes off. I just was deep into labor. And I remember her telling me, okay, I am headed there right now. You need to call your midwife back and you need to tell her she has to come there right now. So, like, okay, I call the midwife back. I explain this again, like, hey, they're a minute long, 15 seconds apart. I'm sweating, I'm nauseous. They're coming so fast. They're so intense of contractions. I really think that you guys need to come. And again, I had just seen her 2 hours ago. So
Yep.
they're
So
like, okay,
she's like,
we're on the way.
what? Right.
Yeah. And they were about 45 minutes from our house because we do kind of live out there in that. So they were a 45-minute drive to come in. So my husband ended up coming home. He got home maybe, 5 o'clock in the evening, 5:30. And I remember I think he was shocked at what was going on because I am like, I'm in like a bra and underwear, and I'm like laying over the side of the bed, just having these contractions back to back to back. I'm vocalizing. That really helped me get through the contractions, was vocalizing through them. Just making those low, like kind of moaning sounds just kind of helped distract me and helped me just get through them. So I was doing that. He was definitely shocked. He asked me, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And I remember just being like, can you clean the house? Maybe clean the house or something. I think that that would help me. I like our house to be, a certain type of way, and I had groceries on the floor, and it was really distracting me that I knew that there were groceries in the kitchen. So he's like vacuuming the house, putting stuff away. The doula ended up getting there. I think she got to our house at about 5:45, and I had moved into the bathtub. I was having the contractions in the bathtub, kind of leaning a little bit over the edge of the bathtub in a deep squat. And like with the warm water around me, I had a cold towel that I was pressing on my forehead. And she came in, and I remember she sat down with me and next to me in the bathtub, and she watched me have maybe like 3 or 4 contractions. She was doing some breathing exercises with me. And she goes, okay, so I think you're about to have this baby. Let's see if you can feel his head. And I hadn't think to do that. So I thought, okay, let me see if I can feel anything. So I reach down and I feel, and I remember showing her my finger, maybe like a centimeter down, and saying, I feel something right there.
Oh my goodness
So
gracious.
he was already so close to coming out, and the midwife is nowhere to be found. She's on the way, but still probably 30 minutes away at this point.
Ooh.
So I think my doula was shocked because she was not expecting that. And first time mom, she just got there. So she said to me, okay, so we have 2 options. You can have this baby here. We can deliver the baby together. Or, I don't think your midwife's going to make it. We can call 911. I said, absolutely not. We will not call 911. I will have the baby here by myself. If I understand too that there is some like liability issues with, I think that she was like a little bit nervous about that. It seemed like, with there not being any sort of like midwife there, something like that, like if something were to
Right.
go wrong. So looking back, I can see why she was so concerned. But anyways, I said, we're not going to call 911. I'll have the baby here. So we just continue to do what we're doing. My husband started to blow up the birth pool in the living room. And I remember once it was blown up and there was water in it, I hopped up out of the bathtub. I jumped into that birthing pool, and I was using combs throughout my labor, or not throughout my labor, but more towards the end, like right before I was pushing. And the whole time we were doing with the doula, she was having me do the like horse lips breathing, where on your exhale you kind of make like horse lips and you blow that air out through your mouth. And I was just really trying to relax into it. So yeah, so we just kind of kept having these very fast contractions. And then at maybe 10 minutes before my son was born, my midwife walked in the door. I remember she had this flashlight. She shined it into the birth pool and she said, yep, I see the head. She goes, are you pushing? And I was like, no, this whole time I had been trying so hard to not push because I was just nervous. I was trying to wait for her. I wasn't anticipating having a free birth. So I knew she was on the way. So I was doing everything I could to not push. And she like had me get into, I was kind of like leaning over the side of the birth tub. And she asked me if that was comfortable. And I was kind of like, no, I don't really think that this is that comfortable. So I ended up kind of getting into more of like a seated position. And I pushed for 10 minutes and I pulled him out. And brought him up to my chest. He did have the cord wrapped around his neck. So I took that off, but I did get my dream of being able to pull him out of the water and up to my chest. So that was a super magical moment.
Have you ever gotten unbelievably excited about your healthcare? Now, this may sound like a joke, but I am not joking. When my family learned about Samaritan Ministries and made the decision to leave our insurance plan and move to a biblically based healthcare sharing ministry, I was left with a feeling of joy and excitement because the difference in experience was so colossal. Let's take pregnancy and birth, for example. In the health share model, here's what we experienced with Samaritan. We submitted our need, which means we let Samaritan know about our medical expenses. And this is when the fun begins. Samaritan shares that need with their members, directing the members to send us payment to help cover those medical needs. Want to know the most beautiful part? That's not all they send. So often with my shares, I would receive a note of encouragement or a thoughtful prayer. The touch of another human letting me know that my family is on their mind and in their heart. It is such a beautiful biblical model, and it's truly what has kept my family around for so many years. I'm sure this has piqued your interest, so hop over to the show notes where you can find a link that will take you to learn even more amazing reasons why hundreds of thousands of Christ followers are moving to Samaritan Ministries for their healthcare needs.
And yeah, it was a really empowering experience. But, looking back, I can't believe that I didn't call them sooner to say, hey, like, this is already so intense out of nowhere. Maybe you guys should head this way.
Oh, but how can you know? It is so, I mean, the thing that's so complex about it is that you've never experienced this before. So the
Right.
question becomes like, am I just like, is this just really hard for me? And, like, is this going to be hours and hours of this? I don't know how I'm going to make it. But then realizing that,
Yes.
actually you've already been in transition and your baby is
Yeah.
crying. Gosh,
Yeah,
it's just
I'm crowning right now. I think that he's definitely coming.
I'm crowning. I think you should come. Like,
Yeah,
wow,
can
just
you come stop by, please?
oh my goodness. You mentioned that moment that was so magical when you pulled him up out of the water. Like, if you can describe that, what was that like?
Wow, it was like I was doing drugs or something. That's what it
Mhm.
felt like. Just the the euphoria of that moment was, I mean, I feel like I lived on that moment for months after he was born. Just how empowering it was and how confident it made me feel that, oh my gosh, I did that myself. It was me and my husband, and we brought this life into the world. And there's just like nothing that compares to that moment. And it was just really amazing. I remember, like, crying in the moment, and we have, like, a little video of it where I'm saying, "How did I have a baby? Like, how did I have a baby? Like, where did this baby come from?" Because I just could not believe that I was just at the grocery store, like, 2 hours ago, walking down the aisles, and here I am in my living room holding a baby. Like, where did this baby come from?
Oh, it truly is incredible and shocking. And that is certainly one thing that I've noticed with precipitous births. And oh my word, especially with a first-time mom with a precipitous birth, it's like your brain takes time to catch up to your body. Like
Mhm.
there is this like complete like I am unsure of what is going on. Like both parts have
Yes.
to take a second to integrate because it's just so quick and so unexpected that there is that question of like,
Mhm.
how did this happen?
That's definitely what it felt like, "What is going on?" I just cannot believe that that was my experience, and then it really felt like I had made the right decision for myself because I couldn't imagine trying to have gone to the hospital, By the time my husband got home, the baby was basically crowning, and we're about 30 minutes from a hospital. So to have gotten into the car or packed a bag or anything like that would have been painful. It would have been just super uncomfortable experience. So I'm just so grateful that throughout this, I followed my intuition to have him at home and just cannot have imagined, this story any other way.
That really is incredible. So after you gave birth to this precious baby, What was your experience like postpartum, both that early postpartum and then a little bit more long term?
Yeah, so initially postpartum, it was cool to see everyone coming to see the baby, getting to bond with him. It was also kind of a scary experience because I never had younger siblings. I did like babysit and stuff, but outside of that, I had never cared for a newborn before, so it was a totally different experience. So learning how to breastfeed, and just in general caring for a newborn with all these like strange sounds that they're making. I remember my husband and I would just stare at him sometimes at night, like, "Do you think he's breathing? Is he okay? Should we do something?" Um, but yeah, it was nice. It was difficult, of course. All good things can be challenging. So the late nights and the up every 2 hours, that is kind of a blur at this point, how that all happened. And looking back on it, I wonder, wow, how did we even get through that? But you go through the days, you do the best that you can. And yeah, I mean, that's all you really can do. But it was wonderful to be able to bond with him. All of the newborn snuggles were so incredible and like learning how to breastfeed and stuff. I did have some challenges with breastfeeding just because I'd never done it before. So it was a learning curve for me. And I didn't take any sort of like breastfeeding classes. And I didn't have any like close friends that were breastfeeding at that time that I could like bounce ideas off of. So I remember for like the first 2 days, I didn't even know that when you were breastfeeding that you were supposed to feed them on both sides. I don't know why I didn't know that.
I mean, who would? I mean,
But
really, that is such a great point of like, I don't know. I don't know how to do this.
yeah, I thought it was like, okay, you start on one side, you wait this like apparent 2 hours or whenever they're showing these hunger cues again, and then you feed them on the other side. And then you just like keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So I was doing that for 2 or 3 days until finally my midwife said, "Mariah, are you feeding the baby on like both sides or just one side?" I said, "Oh, just one." And then I like go over to the other whenever he's ready to nurse again. She said, "Well, let's try to maybe try to do both. It might give you like some more time in between like nursing him, if he's getting both sides at once."
Probably
So
some
that
relief
was
for
a
you
that was a
too.
yes, definitely some relief, but it was really nice. And then further out postpartum, I did start going back to school and going back to nursing school. So I had a couple months left, and he was kind of like our baby in the school. I would talk about him all the time, and I went to school with a lot of other moms. So it was nice to be able to explain what I was going through and having people be able to relate. So I was in a class with all women, and I think probably 80% of them had young kids. So it was just really encouraging to be able to say, the struggles that I'm going through or these happy moments that I'm having, and just having people to relate with was really incredible. And it was also nice to like get out of the house and, you know, I was only going to school about part-time, I would say we're the equivalent, like, with the hours and stuff. So it was nice to be able to, like, have this community with my friends at nursing school, getting to talk to them and stuff like that, and then coming back home to my sweet little baby.
Absolutely. I think community is so critical. And for a number of moms, is missing from that postpartum experience. And that alone can make such a massive difference. You know, that ability to bounce ideas off of someone, to relate to others and feel seen and understood. It's so valuable. So that's amazing that you were able to cultivate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then when I was in nursing school, I really wasn't sure, like, what kind of nurse I wanted to be. Um, so I had a nursing instructor, and she was previously a hospice nurse. So she had kind of shared her experience with that. And I really, liked what she had to say about working in hospice and how that kind of transformed her life, how it was um, just a good environment to work. And also at that same time, my grandpa started hospice care. So I was able to see like what a hospice nurse does kind of firsthand what they're doing, how they're helping the patients, and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I kind of got into the role as a hospice nurse.
I'm so excited to dive into this further. As we were talking before, I had shared with you that my husband just became a hospice liaison. And so we are now involved in that hospice world. And it's really incredible. I know you have so much to say about the comparison between giving birth and then dying and what you're experiencing in your role. And like I had said to you, something so special when Thomas was preparing for this job and interviewing, he was able to share how, in his experience in our home where we live, both of his grandparents died in that house. And they, under the care of hospice, they died there. And how at the same time or later, all three of our children were born in the same place, and how there is
Hmm.
so much connection between that choice to both give birth at home and to choose to die at home or in the care of hospice, and how you're
Right.
looking for lots of the same things, that comfort and peace and close people around whom you can trust, and safety and being in this protective area. So when you reached out to me and you were sharing that you were a hospice nurse and you wanted to talk about those things, I was so excited to have you on because this has been front of mind to us. So would you share kind of your experience and the things that you've learned and how you're relating those things to your birthing experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say, it is interesting how home birth can be so controversial, but passing away in your home is like what people want. A lot of people want to do that. They want to come home to pass away, whether they're in the hospital, and they know that they're starting to decline and that, maybe they need to come home on hospice to subsequently pass away. That is not seen as controversial whatsoever, but home birth is kind of frowned upon by a lot of the medical community and just other people in general. So it is interesting. Now, just as a disclaimer, there is a difference between the natural dying process and then somebody that passes away unexpectedly. So when I do share about this, I am talking about somebody that is walking through that natural dying process. Because they are different. If somebody passes away in a traumatic event and has this like quick death, they don't go through necessarily the same things that somebody that is passing away from like cancer or from what we would call old age, something like that. But yeah, when I started as a hospice nurse, I was not expecting to see all of the parallels that I have between, one end of the spectrum, which is birth, and then the other end of the spectrum, which is subsequently passing away. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Well, of course they're related. You have this pregnant woman who is, intertwined with the life of her baby, and she goes through this powerful labor where her and her baby disconnect and become two beings, two different people. And then that baby grows up, maybe becomes an adult, gets older, and becomes intertwined with the community around them, with their friends, with their family. They become, connected to this earth. Then as they pass away, they start to disconnect again. So just like when they were born, they were disconnected from the mother. When you pass away, you're disconnecting from your community, from your family, from your friends. And that is also a wildly intense process. Um, and it is a rite of passage, a rite of passage from birth into this life, and then your rite of passage from this life and into the next life. So it's not something that I expected to see, but once I started to see it, my mind was just blown over and over again, especially since I just went through the birthing experience only to be on the opposite end of the spectrum was just it was kind of crazy to see, and I couldn't believe that I'd never heard about it before. I'd never really heard people talking about the connections between, coming into this world and leaving this world. And it was just blowing my mind over and over again. So, one of the main things that I saw initially that started to kind of open my mind up to this was throughout pregnancy, and I think I even heard this on your podcast, I would hear people saying the veil is thin. when you're pregnant. I like heard that over and over again, and I felt that when I was pregnant. I felt very connected to everything. I felt very in tune with myself, very in tune with the baby, and just, of course, my surroundings, other people's energies. That's really how it was. The veil just felt very thin. And as I went through the laboring process, giving birth to my son, it only got thinner, as you're bringing this new life into the world. It's just like all of these veils are dropping around you, and this big moment of bringing this life into the world is happening. Now, then when I started hospice care, the first time I heard it, I thought, that's interesting that they're saying that the veil is thin when these people are passing away. So I didn't think too much of it. And then I started hearing other hospice workers saying it again. Well, these people are being visited essentially by their past loved ones. As they're maybe weeks or a week out from passing away, days or hours, kind of just really approaching the end of life. A lot of people, now some people might call them hallucinations, but what is happening is they are seeing their past loved ones. It's a very real experience for them. Sometimes they'll be talking with them, and to them, that person is right there in the flesh. They would know no different than them being there. And the first time I heard of this, I thought, wow, this must be just like a one-off situation where this patient's getting visited by this person. They're saying that they're taking them home. They're like getting ready to leave. This is what, the patient is communicating. And then it started happening again. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I'm hearing these hospice workers telling me, well, the veil is thin when somebody is passing away. And I thought, how am I just learning about this? This is like such a crazy phenomenon that's happening, and I'm just now learning about this as I'm, witnessing it for myself, where these people are truly seeing, whether it's their mom that's passed away or their brother, their sister, whoever it may be, they're being visited by that person as they're really close to the end of life. Um, and, they're just like preparing themselves to, walk into that next life. So that was probably the initial thing that really started to make me think, okay, wow, something much, much, and I already knew, of course, something deeper is at play here, but that was really triggering me to start thinking a lot more into this in general.
Mm. You know what? Oh gosh, it's just so interesting. My family members had that experience, the ones who didn't pass away, instantly. For example, my grandfather had had a fall and then went to the hospital, and he saw what he described as angels in the hospital room.
Hmm.
And my other grandfather who passed away of cancer, what you were talking about, saw his dad and his mom. And how, when we're thinking about this concept of passing away, or as somebody recently, I wish I knew what her name is. I'll have to put her in the show notes, but I was speaking to the APA Foundation, and they said there's someone in their foundation who calls it birthing out. Like that's what dying is. It's
Oh,
birthing
okay.
out. I just love that concept and how that is so
Yes.
similar. But thinking of, being surrounded with love, both this tangible, physical, fleshly world that we see, and then they're experiencing this other spiritual love that they're
Hmm.
able to see with spiritual eyes. I mean, it's just wild, and it's just so beautiful. And what level of comfort would that be to be experiencing that during something that is, as you mentioned, so intense, just like giving birth can be so intense, and having the right
Hmm.
people around us can be critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, there is a lot of underlying things that do help somebody to have a peaceful passing. And it's not just them being physically managed. There are like medications that can be used to help somebody be more comfortable. But if there are underlying emotional or like spiritual holdups that somebody has, whether they're waiting for a loved one to come and visit them, or they're waiting for some like unresolved business, that can actually make for I don't want to say painful because it's not necessarily painful, but it can be more uncomfortable for them because they have these unresolved things that they want to resolve, or whether that is emotional or spiritual. So it's just interesting to watch, all these different scenarios of, how people are taken care of, or, their emotional state, their physical state, and how that plays out throughout their passing.
Mm, how interesting, yes, to compare that back to birth as well, where when,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have to cross that last thing off of your list, you've got to
Right.
get your last set of groceries, or there might be some unresolved situation with your spouse, and then it's after that thing that happens, after you get whatever you were waiting for in the mail, or after whoever arrives in your situation, after your midwife finally arrived, you were able to actually
Right.
give birth. But waiting for those pieces to come together and for the checklist to feel resolved, and how, yeah, it can be a holdup in some ways when there is something that's unresolved, and then when it finally is, being able to let go and release yourself into the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a huge component of surrendering too, and that goes for both birth and for passing away. And you hear now, of course, as a hospice nurse, it's not my place to tell somebody that it's okay to let go. That's not what I'm there for. I'm not there to do that. That would be more of a family member, or and who is it for me to tell somebody that it's okay for them to let go?
Right.
But anyways, there is a component of that surrendering to the process that is so crucial for people having not only a peaceful birth, but having a peaceful passing. And, just recently, we have been seeing people that are waiting for, whether that's like a loved one to come and visit before they do allow them to let themselves to let go. And it's just interesting to see like that sharp decline that some people have after they've had, whatever it is they were waiting for resolved.
Wow. That is incredible. Are there any other big aspects that you think of that have kind of given you a more whole picture of this experience? Or is there any advice that you would give to people in how they think about these rites of passage? I know that for many, there is a lot of fear surrounding birth, right? And that's why
Right.
we so appreciate education and sharing, like, oh, this process is actually really natural. It's actually a
Mhm.
beautiful experience if you let it be. Is there anything that you would say about the other end of the spectrum, about what you've learned from people passing away, that you would share in terms of education for anyone who may feel discomfort about that?
Yes, I love that question. Something that kind of comes to mind is the body knows how to pass away. There are these different physiological changes that happen time and time again with different people that we watch start to pass. And during that time, people tend to get very comfortable. The body kind of turns inward and makes you very comfortable. Different hormones and whatnot are released just like during birth. And it's just interesting because I've had patients that are in, such pain from, whatever their diagnosis may be, their terminal diagnosis, whether that's, cancer or ALS, any of those different horrific disease processes. And as they get to the end of life, I'm, asking them because as my role, I'm trying to make them ideally pain free, or if their pain is at like a manageable level. And as they get closer and closer to the end of life, people sometimes need less and less of these medications to be comfortable because their body is just naturally doing it. So, something that tends to happen is people do get very comfortable when they pass away. The body knows how to die, and it knows how to die peacefully. And when we let those processes take place, it can be a beautiful experience. Watching the family come together to support their loved one, watching their friends come in to support, the person that they care about. It can be such a beautiful thing to witness as they transition from this life into the next life. And even being able to witness somebody taking their last breath, feeling that shift of energy in the room as they go from this life and into the next life is just such a powerful one. And it's just, even though it can be scary because, people love their family, they don't want to see their family member go. It can be a beautiful transition when the person is surrounded by love and cared for, and it doesn't always have to be scary. It can be just like birth can be scary, but when you kind of look at the bigger picture at play and think about they are not ending their journey here, they're just starting a new journey elsewhere.
You know, as you're talking just now, it's making me think about how I oftentimes will say birth can be very magnetizing in the sense that it
Mm-hmm.
can truly pull people together. It can pull a husband and a wife and their baby towards one another so strongly and in such a powerful way that
Mm-hmm.
leaves a lasting impact. And as I'm hearing you speak about this dying process, I see how it can be so similar with dying. As family is drawn together to support their loved
Mm-hmm.
one, what an opportunity when they're on the same page and when they're looking at the big picture to have an experience that is drawing everyone together and building bonds that don't just go away, building bonds that last and a legacy that lasts as that person is quote birthing out. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that is so beautiful, and I don't know that I'd ever really considered it in that light before.
Yeah, and the same way that birth is such a transformative experience for the mother, when somebody that's close to you passes away, that is such a transformative experience for that individual. Whoever that may be that you've lost, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a friend, um, that loss can absolutely change your life the same way the birth of a baby can. You have this whole new perspective on life when somebody passes away. It gives you this like profound empathy for others too as they're losing their loved ones because you really understand that it's hard. It's hard to grieve. And it is just a difficult thing to get through, but it can really spark something in an individual to either change their life for the better or, go on to do things that that person may have wanted to do, whether that person had like a bucket list or something, and maybe after they pass away, somebody else takes on that bucket list to get it done. And it can just be a I guess I hadn't thought about that either until I was, I had to grieve somebody myself, that it is just very transformative. And it doesn't have to be always just so sad and so gray. It can be you honoring their life and wanting to change your life because they impacted you.
Wow. Wow, Mariah, this has been so beautiful and so informative. I love the fresh and new perspective that you have brought both to the birthing experience and to the dying experience. And I think that this is a conversation that maybe people wouldn't have expected, but that they are going to gain so much from. And the way you presented your information was just beautiful, the way you presented your experiences. I am truly grateful. Mariah, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Again, I just loved, 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 loved listening to these videos when I was, when I was pregnant, and I hope that you can continue to do this and helping other mothers, whether they want to have their babies at home or in the hospital, wherever that may be. But I just think that you're doing such great work here too. So I'm happy to be a part of this.
Thank you, Mariah. So, what do you think? Before we jump into this week's episode roundup, I want to introduce you to a new little segment called our educational tidbit. This is where I'll take one facet from the episode and share a little more about the educational side of this topic. So for today, let's talk about the term precipitous labor. A precipitous labor is typically defined as a labor lasting less than 3 hours. Now, just like extremely long labors can be quite physically demanding on the body, the same can be said for these very short ones. Many mothers will describe a sense of feeling disconnected from the process, as if their brain is unable to keep up with the quickness of what's happening in their body. Now, that sounds less than ideal, but here's where the super exciting news comes in. You can actually prepare for your birth in such a way that a surprisingly short birth doesn't feel so jarring. How do I know? Well, I've experienced 2 of them, 2 very precipitous labors, and I had created a set of techniques that I practiced in pregnancy to prepare me for such an occasion. While my first birth had been incredibly long, as soon as my daughter was in my pelvis, she was pretty much out of it. So I wondered if subsequent labors might go much more quickly, and they did. So here's the biggest way to mitigate the feeling of labor just happening to you during a precipitous birth. Learn how to be in the moment. Does that sound unattainable to you? I promise it's not. And I'll teach you how to do just that inside of Happy Homebirth Academy. Check out the link in the show notes. All right, let's end the way we always do. As we head into this week's episode roundup, I hope we can reflect on a few of the incredible points that were discussed. So number 1, we'll start by connecting with our educational tidbit. Not all first births are long. If you are experiencing the intensity that Mariah described, do not be afraid to reach out to your midwife. Part of her job is checking on you, so don't worry about calling her too early. If you're worried, her support can be extremely helpful. Next, intuition is everything. Mariah felt that she needed to give birth at home throughout her pregnancy, and with the quickness of her birth, the reality of that truth became very clear. Listen to your intuition. If you feel like you don't have intuition or don't know how to tap into it, pregnancy is the most perfect time to tap in. Turn off your phone, turn off your screens, heck, turn off this podcast and focus inward. You'll be surprised at how much you can learn and feel. Finally, our bodies know how to be born. They know how to give birth, and they know how to die. It's really quite freeing to see the similarities in these experiences and to trust that they were created this way with purpose. If you're looking for an amazing, grounding, life-altering perspective on dying, I cannot recommend the book Imagine Heaven enough. Wow, I read this book on near-death experiences last year, and the amount of peace and beauty it brought to my life was just incredible and unexpected. You are beautifully designed and deeply loved. Okay, my friends, what an amazing story to kick us off. I trust that you loved it as much as I did. Now, if you have a moment, would you take a screenshot and share this episode on your favorite social media platform? Let's get the word out that Happy Homebirth Podcast is back and in full swing. And that's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Homebirth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Homebirth Podcast.